You're listening to the Trailblazers Podcast, episode 32 with Alvin Irby.
You're listening to the Trailblazers Podcast, where we will explore the stories of successful Black professionals. Join us as we highlight the knowledge, resources, and tools of these accomplished trailblazers to help provide the know-how, confidence, and motivation you need to blaze your trail. And now, here's your host, Stephen Hart.
What's good, Trailblazers? Thanks for downloading today's episode. I first read about today's guest in a CNN article published during the early part of this year, and it took a while for us to finally make this interview happen, but I'm elated to welcome our featured guest for today, Alvin Irby. Alvin is the founder of Reading Holiday Project and Barbershop Books. Now, Barbershop Books is a community-based literacy program that creates child-friendly reading spaces inside barbershops for boys ages 4 to 8. Alvin is an elementary teacher turned comedian and social entrepreneur. He's a Southern transplant living in New York City. He's completed 2 master's degrees, performed at comedy clubs, festivals, colleges throughout the United States. He's taught kindergarten and first grade, and he served as education director at the Boys Club of New York. But one would say his greatest achievement was founding Reading Holiday Project back in 2013. It's a 501c3 nonprofit literacy organization. And his first program is Barbershop Books, which has now been featured on NBC, CBS, Black Enterprise Magazine, and CNN, just to name a few. Now, in addition to performing stand-up and managing Barbershop Books, Alvin also gives motivational talks to middle school and high school students and delivers keynote talks about cultural competence, early literacy, Black male achievement, and social entrepreneurship at national conferences across America. I know you're going to enjoy today's talk. Let's go ahead and dive into today's story with the one, the only, Alvin Irby. Alvin, thank you for being our guest on tonight's episode.
Thank you for having me. I'm really glad that I have an opportunity to talk to you and to talk to all the people who are listening about something that means a lot to me, which is Barbershop Books.
I saw that you were an elementary school teacher prior to Barbershop Books. Is that right?
Yep, I taught kindergarten, first grade, and I also taught 4th grade.
Wow. Was being a teacher your dream as a child?
Absolutely not. My mom actually retired a few years ago after teaching for more than 30 years in the Little Rock School District, and I really never thought I would be a teacher. So much so that I remember during my senior year of high school, one day after school, I was standing in line next to my principal, my high school principal, and he turned and he looked at me and said, "You're going to be a better principal than I ever was." This is what my high school principal said to me, and I looked him straight in his eyes and said, "Never. I will never go into education." And here I am, unable to imagine any other job or career or space I would rather be in other than education. So
what actually inspired your desire to teach then?
You know, I remember my second year in college, I took an education course, and that was the only education course I took my entire time doing undergraduate. And I couldn't sleep at night because my brain wouldn't shut off. And, you know, I just would be thinking about all these things I would do, or I thought I would do if I was a classroom teacher and if I had my own classroom. And it was kind of during that one semester that I kind of accepted my calling and decided to stop running from it. And once I kind of accepted, you know, I'm supposed to be a teacher, I'm supposed to be working in education, and I began to look back at my kind of life experiences, I realized that every single job I had ever had was working with children, whether it was as a camp counselor or whether it was doing research about a summer education program. But I realized that I had been, you know, kind of moving in that direction the whole time.
Are you still teaching today?
No, I'm not. I actually am working full time
with Barbershop Books?
Barbershop Books, although still working to, create the revenue streams that will allow me to kind of pay myself a full-time salary and that kind of thing. But in terms of, how do I eat and live, I'm also a professional comedian. So I travel the country and I do stand-up comedy at colleges, churches, for different types of events, as well as public speaking. So I give keynote talks at national conferences about cultural competency, about education and literacy, about social entrepreneurship and Black male achievement. So those are kind of some of the ways in which I'm able to kind of sustain myself at the moment.
That's awesome. Do you miss the classroom?
Absolutely. But, I don't miss all the red tape and all the testing and paperwork, but just the interactions with the kids and the teaching.
The impact.
Yeah. But, also Barbershop Books provides numerous opportunities each and every day for me to be inspired, To
fill that void, right?
Yeah.
Right. So what inspired Barbershop Books, and when did you actually realize that it was not just another idea, that you absolutely had to bring this dream to reality? Maybe take a couple minutes and tell us about that.
So Barbershop Books, really began in my mind during an experience I had back, I think it was 2008, 2009. It was my first year teaching, having my own classroom, and I was teaching first grade in the Bronx. And across the street from the school where I taught, there was a barbershop. And so one day after school, I was getting a haircut, and one of my first grade students walked into the barbershop, and he just kind of plopped down on the sofa and stared out the window with his bored look on his face. And the whole time I sat there looking at him, I was thinking to myself, he should really be practicing his reading right now, because I knew what his reading level was. And I just remember wishing that I had a children's book that I could have given to him to read while he waited. And it was really in that moment that the idea for Barbershop Books was born.
Deeper.
Yeah.
Right.
But at that time, I felt like I didn't really have enough teaching experience or management experience or some of the knowledge and expertise that might help make what I thought at that time was a really great idea a success in terms of the execution. And so I literally just jotted down a few notes about my idea in Google Docs and saved it. Fast forward, 2 master's degree later and several years teaching and 2 years as an education director in a nonprofit. And I reached a point where I said to myself, you know what? I've taught for a while. I've managed some people for a while. I'm ready to pursue the vision that's been given to me. And that vision is Barbershop Books.
That's awesome. So did you actually, you touched on this a second ago, you didn't actually pursue a business degree in college?
No, I pursued a master's in public administration at NYU. And my program or degree focused on public and nonprofit management and policy. And management was kind of my concentration. And so, I learned a lot about kind of program evaluation, a lot about, managing people, and also about nonprofits. So that was the focus of my degree.
So where do you actually turn to for mentorship and coaching and support to help grow the vision and the brand right now?
I find mentorship and guidance, really all over the place. I have lots of kind of informal mentors, people with significant experience in a variety of different areas, and also just brilliant people who have developed expertise, whether they've been doing their job for, just 10 years or 20 years. But, I'm always kind of learning and growing and trying to make sure that I'm listening. I think that
absolutely,
as a leader, as a person with a vision, sometimes you can get caught up in your vision to the point that you are not always as responsive and receptive as you should be to the wisdom of those who come before, or those who can offer insight. And so, that's one thing that I especially try and be conscious of is just the need for me to slow down and to listen and to observe.
Yeah, that's really important. Was the transition from your full time as a teacher to Barbershop Books a long process?
Well, I guess there's a few different things that happened first. So I initially left the classroom, pretty much to pursue stand-up comedy and to write. That was actually what I left the classroom to do. And, once I left the classroom, I was doing stand-up comedy for the entire summer. And then that fall of 2011, I was asked to come interview for a position as education director at the Boys Club of New York, which is one of the oldest nonprofits in New York City. They provide summer and after school enrichment and sports and kind of academic support for boys ages 6 to 21. And so I interviewed for a job as education director there, and I got the job. And so I ended up, I thought I was leaving the classroom just to do stand-up comedy and to write. But what ended up happening is that after I left the classroom, this other opportunity presented itself, and it was a really great opportunity to gain some management experience, leadership experience, and work in the nonprofit sector. And so it ended up just being such a tremendous opportunity and a rewarding experience. The boys at the Boys Club of New York were really amazing. It was really great, and I feel really humbled and blessed to have had the opportunity to have worked there and to have had the chance to serve such amazing kids in East Harlem. And I worked at the Boys Club of New York in East Harlem. They have 2 other locations around the city.
Right.
So I started working there. I worked there for 2 years, and then I decided that I felt like I would benefit from formal management experience. And that's when I decided that I wanted to pursue a master's in public administration at NYU. And so I started part-time while still working full-time as an education director. And after a semester, I decided I'm paying all this money to go to NYU Wagner, and I can't even participate in a lot of the kind of activities that they have going on because I was working 1 to 9, and a lot of programs for working professionals are often set up to work for individuals working 9 to 5, So just as a lot of the kind of professional activities and talks and different things were getting started, I was in the middle of my workday, So I decided to go ahead and make the plunge into graduate school full time at NYU. And this is my second master's, so I kind of been through this whole process before.
Right.
And I was ready to take it on. And it was a great decision. I'm glad that I switched to full time, and I ended up choosing to leave the Boys Club so that I could pursue grad school full time.
Wow.
And that is when I started or began the process of founding
Barbershop.
Well, Reading Holiday Project.
Reading Holiday.
Yeah, Reading Holiday Project Incorporated is the name of the nonprofit that I founded, and Barbershop Books is actually our first program.
Got it.
Yeah.
So what have been the biggest lessons you've learned about yourself as you went through this transition that you just mentioned, from teacher to founder of the reading program and Reading Holiday?
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is just that how you perceive yourself is not necessarily the way other people perceive you. And that may sound like something that's very obvious that we kind of someone might know. Of course, there are people who may see you differently than how you see yourself. But I think that I've had a few instances where I've just had to really reflect and think about that, in terms of how I communicate different things or the ways that I think just the way in which I communicate different things to different people, and just, being aware of that, that just because you're passionate doesn't mean that everything you do or say or the ways that you do and say things are necessarily going to help you achieve your goal. And so taking a step back and thinking about what is your intended outcome? And are you taking the appropriate steps or using the effective means that are, whether it's communication or some other means of achieving a goal, are you using the most effective things possible? And so that's just something that, I have reflected on, and I'm still reflecting on.
Right.
And even if you feel like, oh, there's this thing that I want to work on or whatever, just because you are aware of it doesn't mean it changes overnight.
Mm-hmm. So true. So, as entrepreneurs, right, we all have these moments of doubt and insecurities with our areas of weakness in business, and coping with the struggles of growing a business, come to play. What do you do to actually get out of your own head with fears when those fears begin to creep in?
When the fears creep in, I think the people that I surround myself with plays a big role in ensuring that those fears are kept at bay. There are people who check me and say, well, yeah, Alvin, maybe you don't have an office or you don't have staff yet, but you were on CNN. And there are organizations that have been around for 10 years and they've never been featured on CNN or who've never been on the Today Show. And so, I have, really amazing people who remind me of where we are and where we've come from in such a short period of time. And then also every time I walk into a barbershop, right, to check on a reading space, then I see a grandmother reading with her son, or I see a father reading with his daughter, or I see a little boy curled up in a chair with a book. Those moments, they really affirm and confirm for me the power of this idea of Barbershop Books. And so, those things, help keep the fears at bay. And then also, being a professional comedian, I get up in front of people that I don't know, and I hope, that I have a certain level of confidence that my jokes are going to make them laugh, but you just really never are absolutely certain. And so, over the last 7 years of doing stand-up comedy, I think I've built up a certain kind of mental, emotional toughness, right, that has helped me in terms of being willing to kind of continue to step one foot in front of the other despite fears, right? It doesn't matter how rowdy the room is. It doesn't matter whether the TVs are on, whether people are screaming and yelling in the background. When they announce my name and call me onto the stage, I'm going to bring the funny and I'm going to deliver my jokes.
Right. Love it. And I'm loving the message you're sharing. What's advice that you give to a teacher listening who's maybe on the front side of having an idea, an entrepreneurial idea? What would be advice you'd give to them? I
would say first test your idea, right? Mm-hmm. So before I founded my organization and did all these different things, the first thing I did is I went into barbershops with a handful of books, an arm full of books, right, carrying all these books for both children, adults, adolescents, and I went into barbershops and sat them down, and I just observed. I just observed for hours just to see what would happen if I put these books in these waiting areas.
Sure.
And what I found was that young children were the ones who were most likely to engage with the books. It was based on that observation that I decided to focus Barbershop Books exclusively on the youngest children, because that would allow me to pretty much have the greatest social return on investment, right? I have a limited amount of resources, and so I want to use those resources to have the greatest social impact possible. And so I know that if I bought children's books, they would get used most often. And so that confirmation for me led me to begin to move forward with my idea. If someone has an idea, you should go out and find out if it's a viable idea, because just because we have a good idea
Doesn't mean there's a need for it.
Doesn't mean there's a need for it. It could just be something that you think is cool, but if people aren't going to use it, right? If they then it just remains just a good idea that never comes to fruition. So I would say that's kind of a first thing is test it out and don't be afraid to fail. I initially was like, oh yeah, we can have all the men reading and then the boys will see it and all this, but it turns out a lot of men are on cell phones or they're just chatting and talking to their friends or they're watching TV, right? But there are men who will encourage, and the barbers will encourage the boys to read the books, or the barbers can talk to the boys about the books that are in the reading space. So, I've learned some valuable lessons around just being fluid and being responsive to the actual needs that are present and the actual kind of cultural space, right?
Right.
Where the idea will be implemented, So that's, also something that I think, I've spent a lot of time thinking about.
Was there anything else that you identified missing? Maybe in your observation, realized that there were other opportunities available?
I don't know that I saw, things that were missing, but I think I really just saw a lot of great things that were there. Right. So I saw the value of the barbershop. I saw for the community and for those who frequent that business or those businesses, I saw the value of the relationship between barbers and little boys, right? I saw the cultural significance of the barbershop and the diversity of the patrons. Right? So barbershops are really one of the only places left in many black communities where you have people from different socioeconomic levels interacting with any level of substance. You have somebody who lives in the projects, right?
Could be conversing with a CEO of some company.
Absolutely. And that just does not happen with any level of regularity in our society today because of the way in which so many communities are residentially segregated.
Mm-hmm. So true. That's powerful. Alvin, how do you define success today?
For me or for Barbershop Books or?
For you.
For me, success is freedom, free to pursue the passions that have been placed in my heart and in my spirit, and free to cultivate and develop the skills, talents, and gifts that have been given to me. That is really what I view as success for me. It's not necessarily being rich, because if that was the case, well, then I am definitely on the struggle bus. But success is I get to wake up and do something not only that I love, but that is actually transforming communities all across America.
Absolutely. That's amazing. That's success, man. So what are you most grateful for right now?
I think I'm grateful for the freedom that I have. There's so many people who get up every day and are working hard to survive and to feed their families and to support themselves, but they're doing jobs that are not aligned with what it is that they were put on earth to do. And so what am I grateful for? I'm grateful for the opportunity to pursue my passion and to realize the gifts that I've been given and to share with others. I don't take opportunities like this or opportunities to speak in front of middle schoolers or opportunities to speak to teachers lightly. I've been given this freedom to speak on behalf of voiceless children, on behalf of teachers who've been silenced, on behalf of individuals who didn't have an opportunity to go to college or to get the type of education that I've received. And so for those reasons, I am, eternally grateful and thankful.
Wow. So what can we look forward to, with you? Are there any big dreams for the coming years, the next 5 years and beyond that you care to share with us?
Well, my vision for Barbershop Books is to place child-friendly reading spaces in every black barbershop in America that has, children who go to those shops. Eventually, I'd love to, get some, donor to create a Barbershop Books endowment where we provide free children's books to all of our barbershop book locations, right? So that we can actually begin to give away books so that we can increase the home libraries of children. There are literally children who don't own their own children's books, right? They don't own age-appropriate books or culturally relevant books, right? And it matters. It really does matter.
Absolutely. Absolutely does. Well, from your mouth to God's ears, man.
Absolutely. I agree with that. What other things am I looking forward to? There's so many authors that reach out to Barbershop Books, who want us to feature their books. And so, I really, want to think very carefully, intentionally about how we can create a platform within or connected to Barbershop Books that will allow all of these amazing authors, many of whom are independent authors, to connect with the target populations that we're serving, right, and for whom they have written books. So, that's definitely something. And that may mean, us actually creating our own nonprofit publishing company under Reading Holiday Project Incorporated. Also, I'm really excited about just, for myself, this fall I'll be publishing my first children's book. It's called Gross Greg, and it's about a curious little boy and his insatiable appetite for boogers. And,
love it.
It's a laugh out loud children's book that features cute little black boy. And it really, it's the reason I wrote it is because I just want to carve out a safe space in an early childhood classroom for young black boys and other boys of color to be able to laugh and be silly and have fun without being perceived as disruptive, right? Too often, little black boys are disciplined just for being themselves, just for being a child.
Sure.
And I want to really create a space for them to be able to do that. And they deserve to laugh. They really and have fun and be a child like any other child. But too often, young black boys are being told to man up. They're being told that they have to dress this way and
a certain way,
and all these different things that aren't necessarily, these restrictions aren't placed on a lot of other children. Now, I understand why a lot of these restrictions are placed on black boys, because there is a hostile society out here that has very negative perceptions of them that could have life or death consequences for them. And so I understand that, but in our effort to protect our children, we shouldn't be robbing them of their childhoods,
Right.
And so Gross Greg is really an effort to just remind us as adults, and especially black people, of the importance of allowing our children to be children,
Right. I'm really appreciative of you, taking a step forward with this platform. I think it's much needed in our community, and just the impact of that CNN article that allowed me to connect with you and, so many others to connect with you. And through my connection with you, I also met several other people at that point in time that have become champions for my own platform. So I just feel like, what you're doing goes way beyond. You've created a web that is connecting people in and through the community. I just want to let you know, give you a big up and say, I appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate that you're continuing to push ahead through this point of growth. We in business, it's never, A to B. There's some rocky roads and some dark valleys to get through, but I encourage you to keep pushing on, because what you're doing is needed in a big way. We're talking about, books. I before we kind of begin to wrap up here, I'd love to talk about some resources and have you maybe share what's one book that you've read in the past year that's inspired you.
Yeah, so I'm reading Stephen King's book on writing, and it's just him talking about about writing and his process and what he's learned over the decades that he's been a writer. I love to write.
What's the title of that book?
I believe it's Stephen King on writing.
On writing.
Yep. And he just talks about, writing and, kind of, it's in many ways autobiographical. It tells a lot of his kind of childhood and how he came to kind of develop the passion that he and expertise that he's developed over the years. But it's a great book. Another great book that I've read that happens to also be about writing is called Story. And I believe it's by Robert McKee. And it's such an insightful book. I mean, this was a guy who wrote several, I think he's won a number of Academy Awards and written lots of feature films, scripts for feature films and things like that. But, it has some just brilliant and insightful jewels about story and about how do you construct a powerful story. And one of the things that I think, it sticks with me so much that he talks about is that what's most important when constructing a character is really the ability to, create a character that the reader can, or the audience can empathize with. They don't have to like the character. But they do need to empathize with the character.
Absolutely.
Right? Even if they don't like him. And so, I think that empathy is so important. And I think that if we look at the state of affairs in the United States right now, a lot of it is due to an empathy deficit. We have police officers who can't see themselves or their children or their families in the people that they are kind of tasked with serving.
Protecting.
And protecting, yeah. And so those are some books, that I've read, that have been great. But I'm usually reading anywhere from 3 or 4 books at any given time, at the same time, like at different paces. So I have a number of other books that I'm kind of, reading through. But those are 2 that are really great that I've kind of read recently. One other book that has informed kind of how I've thought about barbershop books especially is a book called Contagious. And this is a book that was written by Jonah Berger, who's currently a marketing professor at the Wharton School of Business. And, in it,
kind of sight guy too.
Yeah. He's definitely a psychologist, but his research has implications for marketing,
Absolutely,
yeah.
Right. There's a lot of stuff with Derek Halpern from Social Triggers. That's actually how I was introduced to Jonah.
Yep, and that's exactly what the kind of things that I took away from his book, Contagious, that are most relevant for the work with Barbershop Books. In his book, Contagious, he talks about this idea of triggers and how if you connect or pair 2 unrelated things long enough that one becomes a trigger for the other. So if I ask you, when you hear the word peanut butter, what comes to mind? Most people say jelly, right? Those are 2 completely different things, but because they've been paired together so often, peanut butter is now a trigger for jelly. And what I hope to do with Barbershop Books, and what I believe is that if Barbershop Books can pair books and reading with barbershops long enough, and the association becomes strong enough, then anytime anyone, a child, a parent, whoever, a barber, they see a barbershop or think about the barbershop or brush their hair, right? Just thinking about it or seeing a barbershop will trigger them to think about books and reading.
Wow.
And so, reading his book really, I think, gave me that insight about the potential influence and power of this idea of Barbershop Books.
That's a great vision. I love that. What's something small you've done this month that you're proud of?
Something small that I've done this month that I'm proud of. Wow, that's a great question. I wish you would have gave me that question ahead of time. I'm sure I would have had some really
Believe me, I give it to people sometimes well ahead, and they're still
that's such a great question, and one I probably am going to steal and keep with me to use in an interview or something. Oh, here's something. When Barbershop Books, when I go to conferences or barber expos, and to kind of present or to display in a booth, or something about Barbershop Books, we normally set up a Barbershop Books reading space where we have the bookshelf with the books. And so one of the things that I've started to do now is whenever I go into a city, before I leave, I find a barbershop that I can donate the reading space to.
Wow.
Because there are lots of people who've made donations to Barbershop Books, and they say, well, we don't have a barbershop in mind, but you can use our donation to find a barbershop that can use the reading space. And so I was just in Chicago for an expo, and so while there, I donated to the barbershop. I donated a reading space to a barbershop there, and this is something I definitely plan to continue to do. Barbershop Books over the next year, we have 11 target cities that we plan to expand our program into. And our goal is to have at least 10 reading spaces in each of these cities. And some of the cities we're targeting are Philadelphia, Baltimore, Newark, Atlanta, Chicago, Los Angeles, Columbia, South Carolina, Columbus, Ohio, Oakland, just to name a few. But we definitely are looking for individuals who want to partner with us and expanding to those cities, as well as some of the other ones I may have not mentioned just now. But that's something I'm really excited about. But
that is exciting.
Yeah, I really gave you a long-winded answer to you.
Nah, man, that's cool. That's cool. So, Alvin, name an online resource. Could be an app, software, or tool that you use every day. You can't live without it.
Facebook? No, I'm just kidding. I would say that Google Alerts is such a tremendous, I said it for Barbershop Books. I said it for Black Male Achievement. I said it for literacy and children's books. And so every morning when I wake up, in my inbox, there's a list of articles and resources that are related to this kind of field that Barbershop Books finds itself in. And so, it's tremendously helpful for me to have kind of all of these things aggregated, or kind of, I don't know if aggregated is the word, but just kind of all centrally located in one space. So that's a resource I would recommend to anyone who's looking at trying to, keep their hand on the pulse of a particular topic or field or something like that.
That's great. So before we wrap up, I just want to invite you to take a couple minutes, impart an inspiring message that will help our listeners to elevate their game and blaze their trail.
Well, I would say don't be afraid of your talents, gifts, and skills, but seek out ways to cultivate them, to develop them, and to pursue them. Don't be afraid to take a risk. When I graduated with my second master's and all the debt that came with that, instead of taking a job out of fear, I decided to take a risk and to use what was left of my loans to support myself to continue working on this idea for Barbershop Books. And I could have easily said, you know what, I don't have any funding right now that will allow me to live on my, to support myself 8 months from now. So let me just take a full-time job, save up, maybe work on it on the side. And everybody has their own paths, and you have to find yours. But I would say once you find your path, do everything you can to run that race and to stay the course. Also,
love that. This
isn't necessarily directed to that particular question, but there's something very important that I think I want people to know about Barbershop Books before we finish up our conversation. Sure. So one, I want people to know that, Barbershop Books is a community-based program that creates child-friendly reading spaces in barbershops. Our mission is to help young Black boys and other boys of color between the ages of 4 and 8 to identify as readers. And the way that we do that is by connecting books and reading to a male-centered space and by involving men in the early reading experiences of young boys. All the time we get the question, why not beauty shops? Why not laundromats? Why not churches? Why not community centers? And our response is that our mission is to help young black boys and other boys of color to identify as readers by connecting books and reading to a male-centered space and by involving men in the early reading experiences of young boys. And barbershops
hitting the nail on the head
are pretty much the only male-centered space that exists in communities, where children go and sit for extended period of time. Too often today, the reading experiences, the early reading experiences of young boys are almost exclusively skill-based, right? So when they come into first grade or into kindergarten or into second grade, the very first thing that teachers do is they administer an assessment to find out what children don't know, right. What skills they don't have. And what Barbershop Books believe is that a lack of skills is not what's mainly contributing to the low reading achievement of black boys. We believe that all black boys have just as much capacity to read proficiently as any other children. What we believe is that they're not being given a reason to read. And when I say that, what I mean is that there are thousands, if not millions, of young black boys who never see black men reading or who never have black men encouraging them to read. Because today, less than 2% of teachers in the United States are black males. And when you look at the first few years of school, the exact period when young black boys are learning to read, there are almost no black male teachers. It's almost non-existent. So they aren't getting this modeling, right, this relevant reading models at school during the critical period for reading acquisition, pre-K to grade 3. And then, unfortunately, a lot of black boys are raised by single mothers, and so there aren't relevant male reading models at home. Right. And so many people are like, why aren't black boys reading? And the question I have for people is, why should they read? Because a young white female is telling them, their teacher is telling them that reading is important. Well, teaching kindergarten and first grade taught me something very important. It taught me that kids just want to be grown. Mm-hmm. Kids just want to be grown. So that means that whatever they see the grown folks in their immediate environment doing, that's what they conclude it means. That's what they conclude it means to be a part of their family and a part of their community. And so if reading isn't a part of that, then children conclude that reading is not a part of who they are. And that is exactly why Barbershop Books is working to create the type of reading experiences that will lead young black boys to say 3 words: I'm a reader.
Nice. Alvin, thank you so much, man, for coming on the podcast today. I appreciate your wisdom and what you're doing again, man. It's been awesome. Before we let you go, please tell us how we can stay connected to you and how we can get involved.
So you can find more information about Barbershop Books on our website. It's barbershopbooks.org. And we're also on pretty much all the social media at Barbershop Books, all one word, on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, at Barbershop Books. If you want to keep in touch with me, I'm also on social media at Alvin Irby. You can find all the information about me there. Also on my website, alvinirby.com. This has been a really great conversation. I'm so glad that you gave me the opportunity to be a part of your amazing podcast.
You're welcome. You're now part of the Trailblazer family. We welcome you with open arms. We're here to support you and help spread this brand and what you're trying to give to the world through Barbershop Books. And so I couldn't be happier to have you on the podcast and to share this message. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for today. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Trailblazers podcast. I'll be posting links to all of today's book recommendations and links mentioned on our show notes page at tbpod.com. If today was your first time listening to the Trailblazers podcast, I just want to extend a warm Trailblazers welcome to you. We're so happy to have you here, and we encourage you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button in your favorite podcast app. Go ahead and browse through some of our past episodes to keep the knowledge flowing. If you're a fan of the podcast and today's content, and you're maybe already subscribed to the podcast, please continue to share and invite your friends, your family, or colleagues to listen to an episode that you think might impact them most. We believe that someone listening to these inspiring stories will be moved to make significant changes that will have generational impact for many others, both now and well into the future. Don't miss next week's episode. New episodes are released each and every Monday by about 5 a.m. Eastern. Trailblazers, jump off this podcast today. Go find a way to rise above, go way beyond, and keep blazing your trail. Cheers.